Hello. Today we will be going over Anchore's Enforce module. Anchore Enforce is our compliance module based on our policy as code engine. Our out-of-the-box policy packs cover the major US federal standards and allow you to shift compliance left by integrating checks into your developer workflows and generate reports showing compliance status with clear reference to the relevant controls. You can also enforce internal standards, such as preventing the use of unapproved licenses or distros, or enforce the presence of absent content. For example, we are a Red Hat shop and there should be no Ubuntu and block any content which uses the GPL license family. Indeed, a policy gate can be applied to any piece of metadata in the SBOM. You can then use the policy engine to send pass or fail information to any part of your SDLC, such as a build or a deployment. Let's see what this looks like in practice. For this example use case, I'm a company trying to get my FedRamp moderate accreditation. We are also an Alpine shop and do not allow software licensed under AGPL. Inside of Anchore, if we go over here, we can add tags manually through the UI by clicking on this Analyze Tag button and then specifying a particular registry, repository, and tag that we would like to scan. We can then tell Anchore to reach out and analyze this. We can also do this through our command line tool Anchore CTL as well as our API. In this example, we'll be working off of this repository here and utilizing this pipeline procedure. We will build our image, submit it to Anchore to be scanned, and then retrieve the policy compliance status at this point. So at this stage, we will build our image, and next we will submit this to Anchore to be scanned. Inside of this stage, we will use our command line tool Anchore CTL to submit the image to our Anchore deployment, wait for it to be analyzed, as well as attaching the Docker file associated with this particular build. Once we do this, Anchore will then pull down that image, retrieve it, and then generate that SBOM. Here inside of Anchore, we can go in and take a look at this particular digest that we just generated. We'll see that we can take a look at our SBOM section and get a nice human readable version of this SBOM. We can see a couple of things that are relevant to our Anchore Enforce module at this point, including all of our files and permissions set on each of those files. We can also see each package that is installed along with its version, its type, its size, its origin information, and license information attached to that particular package. We can also see files where Anchore will retrieve these in their entirety and make them a part of this SBOM. So here we have our Etsy password file that has been added, and we can see the file contents here. Now for this particular use case, we want to see if this image is in fact FedRamp compliant. So we will use our FedRamp policy by going over to our policy view, and we will make sure that the FedRamp policy is in fact active, which it is here by this little active icon. This means that this will be applied automatically to every new SBOM entering our system. Now that we know that this is running, we can push our image back through our scan, and it will automatically be scanned against the FedRamp policy bundle, and we will be able to see our compliance status. We're doing that directly here inside of our CI system and using a -F flag, which means fail based on results. This means that if our image that we push up to Anchore to have its SBOM generated and then evaluated does not comply with the FedRamp standards, it will break our pipeline and prevent it from proceeding on to another stage, such as deploying this image or pushing it to a production registry. Here we can see that in this case, it has broken this pipeline because it did fail our evaluation, indicating it's not adhering to the FedRamp standards. And we're also going to see a few of our checks here. We can go and see these results directly inside of Anchore if we go into our Policy Compliance tab. Here inside of our Policy Compliance tab, we can see all of the different controls that are failing as well as what their final action is. A stop indicates a failure, or in this case, a failure of the FedRamp standard, where we do not comply with that standard. And we can also see exactly which control family we're not adhering to. So in this particular case, we have two files that have setuid or setgid bits set on them. We also have an effective user of root. We have one package installed that is licensed under AGPL, which is something that we do not allow. And we also do not have a health check included inside of our Docker file. So for all of these different findings, we can go ahead and address these, which we'll do so inside of our pipeline. So we'll go ahead and re-push this back through our process, which can be shown here with this pipeline run. We can see we're going to build our image again. We're going to submit it to Anchore just like we did before, and then we'll do our policy check. We'll see that this policy check is still using that same fail based on results flag, but in this instance, it shows up as a passed evaluation and we're allowed to proceed through the process. If we go back into Anchore here, we can go to our most recent tag that we've just pushed through and take a look at our policy compliance tab. We can see that we have no findings that came back indicating that we have passed all the FedRamp checks, and it has produced a pass result, which means we can proceed on and that we are adhering to the FedRamp standards. Now, FedRamp is not a one and done type check, as well as a lot of these other standards out there are not a one and done type check. We need to constantly evaluate all of our images on a regular basis to make sure that we're still complying, whether that's tomorrow, next week, next month, or next year. We can do this inside of Anchore using our reporting engine. If I jump into our reporting engine here, we'll see that we'll come into our new report section and we can write up some reports that will do various different tasks, typically associated with ConMon or continuous monitoring. So what we'll do, and I already have a saved report here to do this, is we're going to set up a check that's going to look for any images that are failing our policy evaluation. Because FedRamp is our active bundle right now, this will mean that this will search for any images that have failed the FedRamp standards, and we'll constantly check for this over time. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and click on this template. I can add some filters if I'd like to, like say, look at any that have been evaluated during a time period or only looking at our latest tag, as well as scoping this down to something very particular if we want to do so. But in this case, we'll just leave that as a simple failure, indicating that this is going to look for any images that are stored inside of my system that have failed the FedRamp policy. I can go ahead and preview results and see that we do in fact have one that was pushed outside of our other image that we pushed through our policy here that is in fact failing our status. We can see the last time that was evaluated as well as the policy ID that it was evaluated against in our evaluation status. What I can do at this point is I can save this report. I can name it something in particular. So we'll call this FedRamp check new. And I can have this run on a regular basis to fulfill that continuous monitoring need for this particular standard that we're going for. So what this report will do is it's going to run it every Monday morning at 8 a.m. my time. And it will generate this report so I can see which of my images, if any, are failing the FedRamp standards and which I need to go ahead and actually address something within to make sure that I'm still adhering to those FedRamp standards and adhering to the ConMon use case that I need to. So I can go ahead and save this report, which I won't do now because I already have one running, and then we'll take a look at how we can get these reports out. If I go into my saved reports section, this is going to show me all the reports that I have set up to run on a regular basis. And under each report, I can go ahead and retrieve the last run of that particular report. Here we can see that I had this particular check run 3 hours ago, and I can retrieve this in a couple of ways. And these different formats are used typically in the industry to provide to an upstream approver who might need to take a look at these. So we can retrieve them as either a CSV or a JSON file, either raw or flat, depending on how we want to see this information. We can then review that information ourselves, as well as send this up to our authorizing official to take a look at it and show that we're actually monitoring these on a regular basis. So in conclusion, Anchore Enforce allows us to enforce both internal company standards such as license usage and operating systems, or external standards such as FedRamp or NIST, and then integrate these into a developer workflow to automate that enforcement. By doing this, we can ensure that our software is both compliant today and well out into the future, all the while ensuring our developers aren't slowed down by lengthy security reviews long after the code leaves their laptop. Thank you.